All right, Coach Tanner Kolb, I appreciate you being on here. It's been a while since you and I kind of really got to sit down and chat a little bit. And I like to give a little bit of background. And most of the people that are going to listen to this know that my first internship was with Daryl and Mike over with football. But I
Yep.
was fortunate enough for Daryl to be able to send me over and work with you a little bit. I want to say that was 2014, I believe, was the summer of 2014. So I don't know how many years you've been at WVU, but I was probably somewhat early on in your time at
Pretty
WVU.
early. Yeah.
But honestly,
And
I
then
learned a lot. Go ahead.
did I have you for class as well in CPAS?
No, because I did XFiz. I did
Oh,
XFiz.
okay.
So,
Okay.
so yeah, I mean, you were somebody that obviously the whole like experience that I had at WVU was very pivotal in my career, and I still think about things that I learned from you, and looking forward to catching up with you. I mean, it's obviously we've crossed paths. I mean, I think Fairmont wrestled at WVU. What was that, 2 or 3 seasons ago? Um,
Last
I
two
think I think
actually. Yeah.
I think we kind of gave a little head nod and said hi to each other then. But yeah, it's been a while since we've been on here, and we were even off air right before we started. You were already dropping some good knowledge and stuff. So I'm looking forward to chatting with you. Um, what give us a background on you, just so everybody knows like how long you've been at WVU. I know you were at Waynesburg before that. I know you wrestled. So what's your background?
Well, I feel like I've been in strength and conditioning my whole life. I've been here for just over 15 years or just under 15 years, somewhere around there. Before this, I was at East Carolina, I assisted with football, responsible for baseball, volleyball, men's tennis, women's tennis, and cheerleading. And then prior to that is I was at Waynesburg. That was my first full-time college coaching position, and really a big deal for me in the sense of one coach for every sport and a weight room we had four racks, four platforms in the middle, and then four racks on the other side, a set of dumbbells on one end and a couple machines on the other, lat pull down kind of things. And you really learn how to coach when you've got a couple hundred athletes trying to get in there. You're by yourself and you have very limited space. Some people kind of turn their nose up at those small schools, but there's a lot to learn there. Now the downside is I'm a staff of one, so to learn from outside folks, I had to seek that out, and I got in touch with some folks in the area, Tim Belts at Pitt and Todd Hammer, who was at Robert Morris at the time, and the Cal guys, and we had a little group that we'd meet together in the summers, and so that was kind of cool. Before that Waynesburg time, I was working at three different high schools in Michigan. I was working for a physical therapy clinic and contracted into three different high schools. I really enjoyed that time too. Working with those kids, it really feels like you have a little bit more ability to impact them at that stage, and I really enjoyed that. Prior to that, I was a grad student at Oklahoma State, and that was my first taste of college strength and conditioning. Because I wrestled at Messiah College, which is Division III, and we didn't have a strength coach. Um, so I had, my dad was a strength coach for the Steelers, and so like I knew that it was a thing, but I had never been hadn't experienced it other than from him. So going to Oklahoma State and getting to be involved in their program was pretty awesome, and kind of got me thinking of because I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Fun fact: I went to college as a history major, so I didn't even have strength and conditioning in my mind at that point in time. Um, so yeah, I learned a little bit about what college strength and conditioning is, and kind of fell in love with it. Had the opportunity to work with the wrestling team there, which was awesome because they were pretty awesome. Still are a great team, but won a couple national championships while we were there. Men's basketball team was really good at the time, and just getting to see those programs at a level that I hadn't been exposed to before was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's awesome. And I know. Did you was Bobby? You mentioned Cal. Was that Bobby Sapezi? Was he there all by then, or yeah?
Yep, yep.
I mean, Bobby's one of the. Me and Bobby actually just talked on the phone yesterday. He's literally one of my favorite like coaches in my network. He's just an awesome human being. So shout out to Bobby. But was and we're gonna come back to your dad because I know I was actually doing a little bit of research like leading up to. I mean, I always try to do a little bit of research, but and I think I knew your dad was like in the NFL and a strong man, but I don't know if I realized like kind of how good he was and I guess the impact that he's kind of had on kind of the S&C world to an extent. Um, and but when you were at Oklahoma State, would that have been like was Cormier on the team then? Like Daniel Cormier, was that before that was around then?
That was just after. No, no, no. Sorry, not just after. It was a couple years after Cormier was there. Um, it would have been so 2000 and uh 3 4 to like 2007. So and then like trying to think some of the big guys like Steve Mocco.
Yep, yep.
He came in right as I was leaving. But like Johnny Thompson, Johnny Hendricks, Zach Esposito, Guerrero had just finished up 2 or 3 years prior, I think. Yeah, so I mean, it's like their wrestling room is like a Hall of Fame
Yeah,
before they're in the Hall of Fame.
right.
It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
it was awesome.
yeah. When that's I'm a big MMA fan, so like when you said Oklahoma State, like I perked up because I obviously knew about DC and Maka. And I mean, I don't know if casual MMA fans know that like if you're a good wrestler and a good American wrestler and you train an American top team, like Steve Maka is like the guy that's down there running the whole thing, the whole show back behind the scenes and stuff. So that's pretty cool. And I want to get in a little bit more maybe wrestling, like MMA kind of specific stuff later on, because I know you've had obviously a lot of guys that have gone on and like I grew up around I'm a little bit older than them, but the Shuffle brothers. So I know you
Yeah,
had Bubba up there,
yeah,
and I know he still fights and stuff. And so definitely pick a couple questions out of your brain on that too. But um, so what is your? I guess I probably should have led with this. What's your current title and current oversight that you have? I know obviously I mentioned it probably in the beginning with wrestling and soccer, but at WVU, wrestling, soccer, kind of just give us your title, your responsibilities, kind of what your day to day I mean, your associate director, kind of what your day to day operations look like.
yeah. So I'm associate director for Olympic sports. Have had that title for 4 years now. I mean, I think my title has changed 4 or 5, 6 times since I've been at WVU. But my responsibilities really haven't. When I first got here, I got men's soccer and wrestling. And I also had cross country at the beginning. Within a couple years, I had dropped cross country, picked up rifle. We had a coach come in that had been on the track team here before. And so at the beginning, everybody had a piece of track. And so we consolidated it, and he took all of track. And so I took rifle, which was awesome. I knew nothing about it. I didn't, I knew it was a sport, but like, and I grew up shooting guns and whatnot, but I didn't know what they did. Um, and then I had dive for a minute too. Um, I think 2 years I had the dive team. But then we've added some staff members over the years, and so kind of spread some teams out, spread some responsibilities out. I think I'm the only one that still has 3 teams, but I've been here so long that it's like I'm not going to give up one of my teams. I've worked with them for such a long time. I don't want to pass that on to someone else. Fortunate all my teams are very successful. Um, and so, I'm
So,
not in a
so
place.
you still have rifle too, then?
Yes, yeah,
Okay, yeah. I don't know if I realized that. I definitely would like to ask a question or two on that, and maybe we'll come back to that here quicker than we get to wrestling and soccer. Um, and I'm sure it's a little bit unique just because, and you mentioned like the Waynesburg thing, and like that's basically the situation I'm in where it's me and then I have 2 interns, and Darren actually hopped on here. He's going to be one of my part-time coach. That's what Zane was doing for me in the fall. So I mean, I do have like a little bit of a staff, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those where like I've had to grow more as a coach a little bit more just from like an organizational standpoint, not even just like the coaching cues, but just like being able to manage 435 athletes with 8 squat racks, right, in a 2,000
Yeah.
square foot weight room. So it's just something that you just got to make it work. It was cool to hear you say that too. But what are like with the way that you guys work at WV, where there are so many coaches kind of having their share of the weight room at different times? Like, is there in like obviously when I was over at football, like they were big on like their rep integrity. Is
Yeah.
there like an overarching standard within the entire weight room, or is it kind of like up to each coach? And then what are your overarching kind of training philosophies and standards and things like that?
Well, I would say that my standards are probably fairly aligned with what you experienced over, well, you were here with me for a little bit, but I mean, Mike has been such a huge influence on me. I met Mike when I was at Waynesburg, and there's a guy that he doesn't waver. He is who he is. Um, I thought that I was a hard worker. I grew up as a hard worker. Wrestling, it's hard to wrestle and not be a hard worker. You you start working with Mike and you realize he's on a different level. I've never met anyone that works as hard as he does. And that kind of attitude just permeates to the staff, right? I mean, you've seen it. So, as far as, my standards, try to keep that same rep integrity standard with everything. There is always a debate. We'll use like squat depth, for example. Well, does this athlete need to squat to this depth if they never go to that depth? I don't really have that argument in wrestling because there's no position that you can't end up in eventually. Um, with my soccer players, yeah, we'll squat, but we do a lot of unilateral stuff too. Um, so, we're getting that full range of motion. Rifle, yeah, I mean, we train them like any other college athlete. They're still going to do a full body lift, but am I hammering them on, front squatting all the way down or something like that? No. So I think that rep integrity is really important. Set the standard for your team and then hold that standard. My standard for my 3 sports is not the same, but each sport has a standard, and so we hold that standard. If we're doing a push up, I have different expectations depending on my teams. Same thing with a pull up or really any exercise. Um, so there are certain things that will vary from team to team, but you know, the important thing is for me is when I set a standard or when I say something that I'm consistent with it and then I hold that line. And once you do that for a little bit, it really becomes easy because everybody's used to it, and then you get a new group of kids in and they just kind of fall in line, and then it happens again the next year and the next year and the next year. I was just talking to one of our young coaches and about conditioning tests, and it's like, hey, you got to rip the band-aid off sooner or later, or you're just going to deal with it all the time. People don't go to the line, they leave before the whistle. I mean, you're going to have to call some people out, you're going to have to hold some people's feet to the fire, but deal with it early and then hold the standard, and it'll make life easier in the long run.
Yeah, no, I mean, and you mentioned that, and I'm the same way. Like, it's one of those where, like, if our football guys don't go full range of motion, they don't squeeze their chin up at the top. Like, they're gonna hear me yell. But if it's a female athlete, and again, I'm gonna coach it full range of motion. But if she's never done a pull up in her life, and she does a half rep pull up, and she's excited, like, I'm not gonna like ruin her day by being like, I look like dog shit. You know what I mean? But what I will do is like, hey, great job. Now next week when we're doing it, let's try to, like, you're still coaching and holding to the standard, but you also like you do need to have a little bit of like feel and like almost like it's almost like how we talk about relative strength. There's also like and I hate to say because it sounds like I'm wavering my rep integrity, but there is an aspect of like you do kind of have to meet the athlete where they're at. Like you mentioned that with like rifle, like the rifle kids are probably not going to have the same mobility and strength level as like your wrestlers to squat ass to grass and still get out of the hole. So there is an aspect of like the standards are the standards, but there is like a almost a sport by sport relative like nature to some of those things. I feel like for sure. So it's good. I mean, it's good to kind of hear you say that because, like I said, I debate that in my own head all the time. I'm like, not everybody's gonna be able to squat like a running back on the football team. Like it's not all going to look like that.
Yeah.
Not everybody's going to be able to do pull-ups like a wrestler with a 45-pound plate between their legs. Like it's just not always going to look like that. So we coach the standard and we just hype the athletes up when they're getting closer to the standard, and when they get to the standard, we never let them go back below it again. So, um, in terms of just like I kind of honestly didn't realize about the rifle thing. So in terms of just like your yearly kind of structure, obviously wrestling is a winter sport, but they're on the mat basically year round and they're training year round, hopefully.
For sure.
Men's soccer being a fall sport, rifle I guess is technically what is that, a winter sport?
It's a 2 season sport.
2 season sport.
It's similar to wrestling. Yeah.
Yeah. So how does your like kind of weekly schedule look? How often are you having like in the fall? How often are you having wrestling in there, which would be their preseason? How often are you having soccer in there in the fall, which would be their in season? Rifle, like what does your kind of like weekly or monthly kind of schedule kind of lay out in the fall semester and then in the spring semester?
Yeah. I'll start with rifle because they're the easiest to describe. Um, they're probably one of our most consistent teams at WVU, at least in the weight room that I'm in. They're twice a week as long as school's in session. Now, Rifle is one of our teams that is heavily international. So, those kids are going home. Not all of them have the same access to gyms. It's not like here where there's somewhere to work out on every corner. So from the moment class starts till finals of that semester, they're twice a week. The week that they go to NCAAs, we usually have something that Monday. And then, they would lift Monday, Wednesday. They're already gone Wednesday at the NCAA tournament. So we don't normally have a second lift that week. The week after NCAAs is a mandatory off week. So they don't lift that week. But other than that, there isn't a week that they don't lift as long as there's school. And so usually, like I said, Monday, Wednesday, some semesters we go Tuesday, Thursday, and it all just depends on the kids' class schedule. But from the moment I took over that team, Jerry Hanley, who I think was still here when you were here, possibly.
I don't think
he had
was. Yeah, I don't think he was on staff, but I know Jerry. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So Jerry had him before me. Did an unbelievable job with getting those kids to see the benefits of coming in here. Because I mean, not to talk bad on the sport, but every single one of the rifle kids I've ever coached has walked in and had some kind of issue, whether it's some kind of muscle imbalance, a lot of tight hamstrings, whatever. And so, and most of them have never trained, so they get a lot of bang for the buck in here because they have a lot of those kind of beginning adaptations. They're not really far down the line in that diminishing returns. So they buy in really well. I'm very happy with the way they train. Next would be soccer. This year I don't see them preseason. Their whole preseason is done away from me. So most of them are playing on some type of club, whether here in the States or back home. Our soccer team, I don't know what it is now. It was like 60-70% international. So I'm not going to see those guys in the summer, and most of them are going to be playing soccer. So when we get back in, we do kind of some orientation, and this past year, over half our team was new. So a lot of orientation, and hey, this is how you do certain movements. And I pretty much start every athlete on day one with kettlebells, just because I think that it gives me the opportunity to assess movement patterns. And I can, we have kettlebells down to 9 pounds and up to 155. So like I can get one for everybody. And I like the safety factor. Hey, you don't feel comfortable, drop it. You're not going to break anything, maybe a toe. Ideally, that doesn't happen. But so we start everyone with kettlebells. And, here's a squat pattern. Here is a hinge pattern. Here's a pressing movement. Here's a pulling movement. And so we can go through things like that. So we're pretty much after that orientation week or week and a half, we go straight into an in-season lift, which is typically once or twice a week, depending on our game schedule. And then I will have our red shirts, or red shirts and non-travel folks that will do anywhere from 3 to 4 days a week. Maybe more like if the team goes on a multi game trip, they might go and play 2 or 3 games in one trip and they're gone for a week. So that gives me a couple more days with the non-travel guys because they're here. We have an assistant coach that doesn't travel and he takes care of practice, but they don't practice nearly as long when there's only like 5 or 6 of them here. So I'll have a little bit more opportunity with them. We're getting ready to start our out of season program with those guys here next Monday. So we'll have a week of optional kind of orientation again. And then we start mandatory training the first Friday of class. And then we'll go 3 days a week. Through the majority of the spring, they do have a non-traditional season. They play 6 games. We will kind of taper our weeks into those games, but again, it's like, these games don't matter. They're scrimmages essentially. So it's not like our regular fall season where like, hey, we got a game in 2 days. We're gonna take it a little bit easier. Yeah, I'm gonna have a lower intensity day on that day, but we're still gonna train. And then once they get through the last game, we usually don't have too much time left in the semester. And so we might go back to kind of an out of season type of training program, but it's a little different every year. And then once summer hits, they're all gone. Wrestling, I will say this past summer with wrestling was by far the best we've ever had. As far as guys that were on campus. Trying to think from our returning guys, I think we had all but maybe 3 that were here consistently. We had a number of guys that never missed a scheduled lift. Want to say maybe 6 guys that didn't miss a single scheduled summer workout. And normally in the summer, we're going 4 days a week with those guys. We will transition at some point in time once school starts from 4 days to 3. And that's a little bit different every year, kind of depending on when their practice schedules change. Because like you said earlier, they're practicing the whole time as well.
Yeah.
And then in season for them is, the Big 12 is tough. Like these guys are leaving tomorrow to wrestle. They're going to California, Cal Baptist. I think Arizona State on the same trip. I don't remember, but they're going to be gone for 5 days, 4 days.
Yeah. The summer sessions that you're doing, the 4 day split, are you doing like a upper lower split, like something
Yep.
like that? Yeah. And then are you doing pretty much 3 total bodies then once you get them back when the classes are rolling? Or do you kind of do
It
like an upper
depends.
lower total, or what do you do?
It depends. One of the things that we do is so Sunday we train Sunday evenings, and that's a full team lift, and then we'll usually train Tuesday, Thursday in the morning. And that's multiple sessions. They're broken up. So, if I want to do something that's kind of competition team oriented, I'll throw that in on a Sunday. So I don't have a fall lifting plan. I rewrite a program every phase is new. Now I'll look at what I've done previous years, but I've never said, "Oh, this is what I did last year. At this time it looks good. let's implement it. Cause I don't have the same team I did last year.
Yeah.
Even the guys that were here last year have hopefully developed, progressed. And then I've got a lot of new guys. I've lost guys. So, um, I'm always writing new programs, for my teams because it's not the same team. And I like that. I think that that's one of the fun parts of the job is being able to, uh constantly change things. And you could ask Zane or any of the other guys that have interned for with me. Like, I carry my clipboard, got it right here, clipboard. It's got my workout on it. Plus, I hang it on the racks. I'll be in the middle of a workout writing on my clipboard. Okay, I'm changing this. I'm not married to anything. Like, if I see something that I don't like in the moment, I'll change it right there. And because, how long you've been doing this? How many times has something looked really good on paper when you're writing it down, and then you get into it and it's like, oh shit, we've only got 3 of this piece of machinery and I'm getting backed up. It's screwing up I only got these guys for an hour, and they spend 12 minutes standing waiting to do whatever. That's not efficient. I need to change this up.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of goes back to, like, if it's a Sunday workout, I've got to keep that in mind. I've got 36 guys here on Sunday. I can't put something in that is going to cause a backup. So, yeah, we make those adjustments. Um, Sometimes I will, taper my week. Maybe we are going to do our heavy intense day on the end of the week. Maybe we're going to do it on the beginning of the week. Those are great arguments that we like to have with our interns. Like, when should you implement the heavy day? I try to do a bunch of unilateral work for those guys. We might have, just a kettlebell body weight kind of day. We might have a day where we're just doing conditioning circuits. So it really depends on the team. We got a team this year where we're not really cutting a ton of weight like we have some other years. So, like, we ran our strength block a lot deeper into the season than we previously have. And that was kind of cool for me. I was like, oh shoot, normally by this time we're not lifting it as heavy as we are right now. But, like I said, we had so many guys that were here and trained all summer, wrestled hard, lifted hard, ran hard, that, we didn't have to make much adjustment once we started in season, and we were able to keep our lifting at a higher level for a longer period of time.
Yeah. No, I mean that's the dream and the goal right there is that's the thing we deal with at the D2 level is our kids are basically on their own. I mean, I provide them training. Like, there's not a single week out of the year that our kids don't have some sort of access to training,
Yeah.
but it's one of those where, like, if they're not here in person, they're probably not doing it to the
Yeah.
level that we need them to do it, if at all.
I
So it's
don't
one of those
count it,
things where,
right?
yeah, so it's one of those things where, like, I struggle with that. You mentioned soccer, like I don't I think it sucks for our soccer girls. We only have women's soccer, but our soccer girls come back and they have like 2 weeks and they play their first game. Like, that's not enough time to really get physically prepared. So, like, it's like if they're not running on their own over the summer and lifting on their own, like, they're just not gonna be ready to go. So, which is bad. Again, I go back to what I said earlier about the NCAA. Like, do they really care about health and safety? Because if they did, they'd make at least like a couple weeks earlier mandatory for our athletes. But it's also like the girls that want it, they're gonna be the ones that actually put in the work and end up being the ones that play. So, I do want to ask you. So, conditioning wise, you mentioned condition, you mentioned weight cutting. How much, if any, and I know it depends probably on the coach, because I know you've had a couple different football coach or a couple different, sorry, wrestling coaches, a couple different soccer coaches since you've been there. And I'm sure at times that it's been more on their plate, more on your plate. How often and how much are you influencing and overseeing the conditioning aspect of wrestling? Because, as you know, a lot of conditioning for wrestling happens in the mat room, and it's very
Yeah.
like sport specific, if you will. Soccer the same way. Like, they're gonna play soccer to get in soccer shape, but in terms of just like straight running, like tempo running, like that kind of stuff, straight like traditional conditioning. How much are you doing that with wrestling and soccer, or is it mostly handled with practice?
Well, I mean, like I said, our soccer guys are coming in from
Playing.
playing
So
club.
yeah.
Those dudes, I'll tell you what. And was Josh Feldkamp here when you were here?
That name sounds really familiar, and I don't know why. Was
Yeah,
he?
so he had women's soccer years ago. This was back when we shared an office, and well, it was a closet. So him and I were really close, um, and we talked about stuff all the time, especially soccer stuff, because he had the women's team, I had the men's team. And he said one year, he's like, "How come your guys always come back in shape and my kids don't?" And I was like, "I don't know." And so we really started looking at it over the years, and it's like, I mean, I don't know what it is. I have some theories, nothing that I'll say on here because it's it's a theory. But like, I mean, those guys are just never out of shape. So like, I'll do a little bit of conditioning with them in the spring, but I mean, it's not much is necessary. The only soccer guys that we ever really see that aren't in shape are guys that are coming off a significant injury. I mean, and that's whether they got hurt last season and couldn't do much over the summer, that's about it. But they come back really quick. Um, so we do a little bit of conditioning in the spring, but not much because they start playing within 6 weeks, 7 weeks anyway. They start practice week two. It's and like you said, I mean, you're going to practice yourself into soccer shape, and similar with wrestling. Their coaches do a lot of conditioning with them, but I haven't done any conditioning with them in a number of years. This staff prefers to do their own, and they do some stuff. But again, it's one of those sports where um, conditioning specificity to that sport is that sport. Like, you can't run, bike, swim your way into shape for that sport. You can build a base, but you want to be good minute seven of a wrestling match, then you better have been wrestling tired.
No, and it's funny you say that because it kind of goes back to what you're saying about the guys in the summer. Like the best way to get in shape is to stay in shape, just to never not like it's what we were kind of talking about again at the very beginning before I hit record is like it's just like don't ever deload for more than a week or like just relax for a week of Christmas and then get back to work. And like you said, you know, part of it is like the sport demands you to be in shape or else you're just not going to be you're not even be able to be stay healthy. Like there's part of like especially wrestling, like if you're out of shape you're just going to get the shit beat out of you
Yeah,
in practice, so you're either going to have to start doing stuff on your own or you're probably going to quit, and you probably would have quit years ago before that. So it's one of those where I agree with you to an extent, as I think like as much as our job is strength and conditioning, like I think most of the time the sport is the best way to get in shape. I really
for
do. I
sure.
think I think as long as we build like we know that if you get stronger, if you get faster, right? If you become more powerful, then everything else aerobically becomes easier anyways. So it's
Yeah.
one of those things where like the sport is the best thing. Now, one thing that like we do some stuff with football just to help kind of have some structure. I've done some stuff in the past with our men's basketball team. Over the summer for our soccer girls, I do provide them with their conditioning days. And honestly, part of that is just preparing them for the conditioning test that we're going to do. Right? If
For
we're going to
sure.
run a mile, then I'm going to make sure over the summer I'm providing you at least one of your conditioning aids is going to be preparing you for a mile. And we may end up ramping you up to where you're going to run like 2.5 miles by the middle of the summer, and then we start deloading and trying to, or like dropping off our volume and trying to crank up your intensity so that you finish your mile in the fastest time possible. Um, and like same with wrestling, like wrestling, it's one of those where I think some days it's practice needs to be the only conditioning to do, and some days you just need to grab med balls and sledgehammers and just go to work and do something like that, assault bike intervals, and just mix it up with wrestling because you just never know what you're going to get. So I think it's cool to hear that it's kind of very similar to what you guys are doing up there.
Yeah.
Um, with like soccer, I guess specifically, I was going to ask this, and then I'm going to ask kind of a similar question for wrestling. And not to give, I don't want to not give Rifle any love here, but I didn't have really any questions prepared for that. But for soccer, in terms of like speed development, so kind of on the other end of the spectrum, are you doing any like speed work, like where you're actually like taking them out, you're doing like sled accelerations or anything like that? Either in, I guess again, you don't have them really for a preseason, but is that something you do in the spring to work on like some sprint mechanics or some speed development? Or again, are you just like these guys are like getting that stimulus they need from the weight room and the plyometrics that they do, or how does that work?
The when I first got here, coming from East Carolina and coach, working under Coach Connors, he is a speed guru. The man has spent years studying speed development. And I mean, I learned so much from him in my time there. Um, you know, and so I tried to implement all that with soccer when I first got here. And you know, we started in January, and back then they would lift for about 4 weeks in the spring, and then we didn't lift again. And then they would leave for summer. They would come back in the season, and he didn't want to lift during season. And so, you know, like, all right, so I'm going to spend 4 weeks trying to do speed development, trying to condition you, and trying to do strength and power development. I don't have time to do any of it really.
Right.
You know, so it kind of got to a point where it's like I have to triage what I'm going to do. And so I essentially broke my team up into pods, and it's like, all right, this is your biggest, these guys' biggest weakness, these guys' biggest weakness. And so I would have some guys doing some speed development. Everybody did everything, but you know, it was like 80% of your program is this, 80% is this.
Yeah.
Um, and so I did that for a while. And you know, over time working with that coach, he gave me more and more time with them. But really, it never got to be more than like 8, 9 weeks a year that I was able to train them. So, you know, you're spending a sixth of the year training them, and they're spending 5/6 of the year not training. Um,
Well,
it
you know, and not to throw any sport coaches under the bus, but I think that there might be a little bit of a correlation with the success rate that WVU men's soccer has had over the last couple of years since they have the new coach versus, you know, the coach that isn't probably there anymore. I'm assuming that's kind of like what it sounds like is like there's probably some sort of correlation there with training year round versus training 4 to 8 weeks out of the year.
I'm going to throw a blanket statement out there that, I mean, you know, you said these don't get a lot of views, but you know, you'll probably get 50% hate mail for this. I think that every coach out there is good and bad, and success today is recruiting.
Yeah.
You know, um, Buddy Morris used to say you can't turn chicken shit into chicken soup, right? Um, and it's like how much can someone develop in 4 or 5 years? Well, a decent amount. If you can keep someone for 4 or 5 years now, it's like, you know, if we keep someone for 2 years, it feels like they've been here forever. Um, so I think that uh, that long-term athlete development, not that 4 or 5 years, I would really consider long-term athlete development, but it's even more out the window with the way transferring thing, the transfer portal is now. And so success, I think, has less to do with coaching, less to do with development, and more to do with recruiting. And, you know, with Coach Stratz, unbelievable coach. But I thought our previous coach was an unbelievable coach. But Stratz is an unbelievable recruiter. And, you know, like I said, you know, we're well over 50% international. um, Other countries, soccer is life. Little Ted Lasso quote there for you. You know, and so they're finding really good guys and they're bringing them here. And I credit, not to say that Coach Stratz isn't an unbelievable soccer coach, but he's a hell of a recruiter and bringing in good guys. And I think that you know, because everyone wants to hate on coaches when teams do bad. And yeah, recruiting is part of the responsibility, X's and O's, tactical, technical ability. Um, but like trying to keep kids happy and keep them in one place and develop a team. Very few teams out there. You know, and you see it in some of these revenue sports. Luckily, it hasn't necessarily trickled down to the Olympic sports yet significantly, but it, you know, it's coming. So yeah, that's my, I think the kids call it a hot
Yeah.
take.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely agree with you on that. Like, at the end of the day, it's the old saying of the Jimmys and Joes versus the X's and O's. I I was just trying to say, like, I definitely think there's probably a little bit, even from a culture, even from like the mental and the cultural standpoint of even if you only have these guys for a year or two, and they're just physical, they might come in at a more physically more prepared level than the guys that you used to be getting recruiting wise. But if you're at least be able to, because they're training year round now, like lifting wise, training year round, there's probably definitely still some sort of, in my opinion, and I'm not just trying to hype it up. I'm just saying like there's probably some sort of correlation between the fact that they're training at least once or twice in the fall versus never having trained in the fall previously.
Yeah.
So even if you're getting higher quality athletes, you're at least being able to maintain some of those higher physical qualities throughout the competitive season a little bit
Yeah,
more.
longevity, season
Yeah,
longevity, I would say
exactly,
is probably
exactly.
the biggest factor.
Yeah, and I
Um,
was going to ask you about the transfer portal stuff too, so I'll ask you that now, and then I'll come back to the wrestling question. So,
okay.
you mentioned like you kind of have like almost like a block zero kind of orientation phase, like you mentioned that about soccer and rifle.
Yeah.
How much with the transfer portal being like how it is that something that you feel like you're obviously almost doing every semester because you're getting, or is it like it's only like you're kind of individualizing to that kid? Like, if you get a new soccer kid on the team and you're like, hey, do you have a strength training experience? Did you train at, let's say they transferred from what, Oklahoma State, they transferred from Oklahoma State or whatever. Like, do you ask them like, hey, did you train there? What was your training experience? Or are you just like, you know what, you're block zero no matter what, and then you kind of just can they earn their way out of block zero? Or
Everyone
how do you kind
starts
of
at zero.
navigate that where you basically
Everyone
have
starts at zero.
30
Um,
individual programs now?
yeah, and I've always done I've always done it that way. I've never done it any other way. So I don't want to say that that's the best way, but I've it's the best way for me for a couple reasons. Um, what I get with wrestling is guys that walk in, hey, I squat 500 and I bench 400 and I deadlift 600. Well, that's really awesome. Let me see it. Let me see you do it with 200. And it's like, oh my gosh, you can't really stabilize your body. You're squatting high as shit. You're not touching your chest on bench. Not that I care about those lifts, but everyone knows them. Um, let me see you jump, let me see you clean, let me see you snatch, let me see you do something that requires a little bit more intramuscular coordination. And so like I start them on that zero block to kind of get them out of the mindset of it's all about chasing weights. One of the quotes that my dad always says, from when he was at Oklahoma State on their above their wrestling room door, it said, if it was all about muscle, a bull could catch a rabbit. And I think, and especially in a sport like wrestling, it's like it's not the size of the muscle. How fast can you fire it? Um, what else do you have other than strength? And so, we get a lot of guys that are weight room warriors, which I love those guys, but sometimes their focus needs to be adjusted a little bit. And then kind of with soccer and rifle, well, rifle never really moves too far from block zero. Um, they definitely progress, but not too far because they don't need the same things. But like soccer guys, the majority of them have never trained before, and I get a new group of soccer guys every semester. So I've got 6 new guys coming in starting next 6 or 7 new guys coming in next week, that I've never met before. Some are high school kids, some are transfers, some are first year students, but older. So we're gonna run the spectrum there as far as ability. And a lot of it depends on the year. Uh, Normally, their lift times are based on class schedules. So I can't really be like, I'm going to put all the never trained befores in this group and all the second years and third, fourth years and kind of separate them in groups like that. It'd be wonderful if I could. Uh, but you can't. It's like, well, these guys are available at this time. That's who you get. Um, and normally in my off-season soccer program, I'm already running 3 or 4 different programs. The goalies have a program. Or we'll have guys that we'll have a base program, and then I have 3 variations on that base program. Whether it's a guy that we think needs to develop power and strength more, a guy that needs to develop speed quickness more, a guy that needs to maybe lose weight or, kind of conditioning type program. I have those variations. So I'm already running multiple programs um, anyhow. So I kind of start all of those programs at a kind of level one after a block zero or orientation is what I call it. A week to week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on the kid. But I mean, at the end of the day, I'm very fortunate that my coaches recruit good athletes, and good athletes, whether or not they've trained before, can really move through that first block pretty quickly.
Yeah, no, that's I mean, that's kind of almost what I would expect because of just the variance across the board. And like you said, you're already kind of individualizing some bucketing kind of some of their programs anyway. It's almost impossible to completely individualize it. So that makes a lot of sense. Um, the question I was going to ask for wrestling, which I guess there's not a right answer. There's not like a, I just think it's an interesting thought. Is there anything like you mentioned like squat, bench, deadlift, just because everybody knows those exercises. And I know when I was there, you were big on snatch and clean and jerks and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
again, I love those exercises. Is there anything maybe like any like non-traditional type exercises that you feel like is just like way undervalued for wrestlers? I know one of the things I saw a video you were doing with Zach Evanash, and you guys were talking about grip strength and how people have kind of lost, there's like a lost art. And obviously I went to Summer Strong this past spring, and like the Soren like Pop Soren was like the grip strength champion of the world or whatever it was, so it's big with them. But is there any like of that kind of like untraditional like kettlebell stuff, grip strength stuff that you feel like is like like almost like an unsung hero in terms of developing wrestlers?
I don't know if I would say unsung, underrated, unknown, anything like that. I think that, in wrestling, because you could jump on Instagram or whatever and just start scrolling through reels and get however many wrestling training videos you want to find. And, there's probably a nugget of good stuff in all of them. A lot of hot air as well. But I mean, yeah, we spend a lot of time that shelf behind me. I mean, that whole shelf is just different grip implements. I got the Iron Mine yo-yo, another number of grippers, uh, cannonballs, hubs, blocks, stuff to hang from. I got a rotating pull-up handle this year, so that thing's pretty cool. They grip up and it drops, and it's unilateral. I got guys that can stay on that thing moving for 30, 40 seconds. We installed an endless rope, so like climbing rope, not like stand on the ground. You're off the ground. Um, Poseidon Strength makes an unbelievable piece of equipment. Uh, Endless rope that we got in our wrestling room. You can adjust the speed. And so like grip is such a huge staple. And like even preseason, if we're working out, however many days we're working out, I always have an optional grip day that I let those guys. I'll be like, all right, optional grip day this week is Tuesday. We're gonna go at 11. If you want to come in, come in. And we'll do 40 to 60 minutes of grip work. And I have you remember my kettlebell workouts? Like I have all those laminated kettlebell workouts. I mean, I have laminated grip workouts, and there's multiple types of grip strength, and so I periodize each of those workouts. Like just like we want to do our power exercises before our fatiguing exercises. Same thing with grip. So I have these periodized, uh, you know, organized grip workouts that we go through each week, and they'll come in and I'll throw out 10 workouts and be like, all right, choose what you guys want to do today. Sometimes I'll go through them with it. I can't do the whole thing with them because, old guy. But like we'll have some of our coaches will come in sometimes and do it with them. Our athletic trainer trains with me quite a bit. He'll do it with us every once in a while. We'll have some other strength coaches or other folks that decide to jump in. It's kind of fun. So yeah, I really big on grip. Any pulling stuff too, I mean, grip is great. If you can hold on to something, great, but you got to be able to pull it in. So I try to add as much variety in the pooling area as we can as well. Um, One thing I've been doing is we'll do kettlebell rows with a band stretched across the rack through the handle of the kettlebell. And so we'll do kind of like croc rows, high rep, 20 rep rows. And I'm not looking for a picture perfect row. I want a full body yank that bitch up row. I change grips on our lat pull downs and our pull ups. So yeah, pulls are really big. But like you mentioned before, I'm big on the Olympic lifts. All of my wrestlers snatch. All of my wrestlers do hang cleans, do full cleans, do power cleans. We do every variation. Um, I don't hang snatch though. I all our snatches are from the floor, but we'll clean from multiple positions. We jerk, we push press. So I mean, the Olympic lifts are a huge staple. Um, Depending on the time of the year, are a huge block of our program. And I love kettlebells. That's another Coach Connors deal. Um, you know, I kept a lot of those kettlebell workouts that I have and still use are his. I made up a bunch more of my own. Um, Listen, everything we all do is we've stolen or implemented from someone else.
Right.
There's nothing new out there. Well, I shouldn't say that, but everything we do is influenced by someone. So yeah, kettlebells. Um, I think wrestling's awesome because anything could be beneficial. Um, you know, I kind of red flag for me is if I hear someone say, "Oh, you have to do this." Well, I mean, none of the stuff I mentioned do I think you have to do. I think you can get the same means or the same ends from different means. So, wrestling's cool because anything could work depending on how you do it. You know, yeah.
No, I think that's cool. Real quick, what's your reasoning for never like not really doing a lot of power snatches, but basically full snatches from the floor, or sorry, hang snatches versus from the floor?
I don't know. I can't give you a really good scientific answer to that other than um, you know, I just we always start pulling from the floor with snatch and that's the way we do it. Because normally, maybe this is the answer. Normally we'll clean twice a week and snatch once a week. So when we clean twice a week, once one will be a hang clean, one will be from the floor. And then I'll vary the catch position whether we are doing a power or a full catch. Um, with snatch, we always pull from the floor, and then I don't dictate how they catch it. So I'll have some guys that do full snatches that look unbelievable. I'll have some guys that are power snatchers that and look unbelievable, and then I'll have guys that do either and don't look unbelievable.
Yeah.
Which I've often wondered, like, oh, people ragging on your athletes have horrible form. Well, like, yeah, I mean, if if all of our athletes did everything perfectly, we wouldn't have a job. Like, our job is to help correct their form, and I tell my interns, you can bring just about any athlete in here, and if there's something you can coach on them. Nobody does anything perfectly.
Yeah.
Um, and so, like, you have to kind of decide when you're coaching someone, all right, they're doing 15 things wrong in a squat, right? I mean, a beginner, yeah, could be doing 15 things wrong. Am I going to list everything they're doing wrong? No, I'm going to pick, what is the most dangerous thing first and fix that. And then we kind of work our way down that list of fixing things. If I try to fix everything at once, nothing gets fixed. So,
Yeah.
I I can't stand coaches bashing other coaches. If it's for educational purposes, cool, but you be tactful how you do it. But it's like, yeah, I mean, you're judging someone based on their athlete. You don't know, that could be that athlete's first week, whatever. Um, Sorry, I get on the
No,
soapbox
no, I
sometimes.
get, I completely get you, and especially in the world now of the social media world where there's like there's coaches that put a lot, like you said, there's coaches that put a lot of info out there, but like I've never seen Mike Joseph ain't got no social media accounts, but I guarantee you he's got some of the guys doing the best technique in the world out there. And then there's coaches that are putting stuff out there, talking shit on other coaches. So I mean, and don't get me wrong, I've definitely probably talked shit on coaches. I don't want to make that sound like it's never happened, but there's an aspect of like doing it in like you said, almost in a tactful way, or at least in a private setting where you're like, I don't know if I agree with what that coach is doing, but you know, as you said, you don't know why that coach is having that athlete do it. You don't know
Sure.
what that athlete's background is. You don't know what it was, and it's just one of those things where there's a lot that goes into it. Um, I do want to come back to the influence thing, a coach's influence and kind of people like you said, kind of quote unquote stealing stuff from each other. Because I know there is something that um, when I was there, and it's funny because Zane actually brought it up when him and I were chatting a couple months ago about I forget exactly what you call it. I know it's like your 20
Yep.
workout. I want to come back to that. I want to come back to asking a couple questions about like the influence that your dad had. But real quick, when you're like describing loads, whether it's on like a snatch, whether it's on a squat, like how much is that off of like percentages, velocity based training? How much of that is just off of like, hey guys, we're going to work up to like what feels like an 8 out of 10. And that way you're kind of leaving it to the guys. Like if a guy's had wrestled 6 matches all weekend, or the guy lost his first 2 matches in the tournament and was out, like his 80% is not going to feel like the same as the guy that wrestled 6 matches and placed in the tournament. How much are you using kind of just something to kind of build that foundation of like your loading schemes, and then how much fluctuation kind of day to day, week to week is there for that?
Okay, so I'll start. Out of season's way easier to answer that question. Everything is percentage based to start. Um, Now, I'll preface it with saying that I don't believe that percentages are accurate. One of the labs that I started doing back when I was teaching an undergrad class at Oklahoma State as a grad student is, we took everyone in the weight room and they did a max bench. And then we came back the next week and everybody did max reps with 70% of that weight. And so I have kept doing that same lab with interns and classes that I've taught. That was 2004 that I started that. So, we're over 20 years now that I've been doing that. So I've hundreds and hundreds of data points. And the rep range for 70% has been 9 to 22 reps that people have got. Now, these are a variety of trained to completely untrained individuals. So everything's taken with a grain of salt there for sure. But it just leads to like fiber typing is such a huge factor in those relative strength numbers. So I will max my guys kind of 2, maybe 3 times a year, usually not, but 2 times a year. And then we start our program based on percentages. Um, but really, those percentages are for me to get X amount of reps. So, like, when if we're squatting and I want this to be 5 reps, I'm going to set that percentage at what I think these guys are going to get 5 reps. And then again, on my clipboard, like I'm recording everything that we're doing. Because I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this. Can you focus in on that? So, like I have for all our core stuff, I can come down here and I can find, Kolb, set one, he's got 135 pounds, and I tell them plus or minus 5 pounds. So I go up and it's like, okay, I'm going to do 135 for 5. And every set for our core exercises, they have a weight for. And then on their last set, all my sets are not always, but the majority of my sets are ascending. So our last set is our most important, our heaviest set. And, sometimes I'll be like, all right, max reps on the last set, or, I'll let you adjust the weight a little bit more on the last set. And then I'm just recording that. And so if a guy is doing a 2 or more reps on the last set than I want him to be doing, all I do is I change his max on my computer. And so I'm using the same percentage for everybody. But if you look on there, the weight that your squat max might be 20 pounds over, 20 pounds under what you actually did, because that's what I need to set it at in order to get the reps that I want. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely,
Um,
absolutely.
So there's probably a way easier way to do it, especially with all the technology out there. But I mean, I'm constantly changing maxes every week on my athletes. After every workout, I take my clipboard and I sit down on my computer and I change maxes. Um, if they're getting 1 plus 1 plus -1 on their last set, I probably don't change it. If they got +2 and it's like, oh man, they had a great day, I'm not changing it because I don't want to bury people. I'd rather them get more reps than they're supposed to than less. So, like, you know, I, I kind of am not going to put, I don't want to put someone in a position where we're getting buried and they're consistently looking at the sheet and saying, man, I'm supposed to have 225 for 5 today and I got it for 3 last week. I got it for 3 again this week. Like, I'm not trying to, do anything like that to these guys. So yeah, I'm percentage based out of season. Now in season, I let them do a little bit more um self-selecting of the weights. Uh but we'll run percentages up till about Christmas. After Christmas break, most of our lists are circuit based anyway. Now, for my non-starters, non-travel guys, they'll run percentage-based programs all year in season. We had a number of guys, backups that wrestled at a tournament this past weekend. So like they didn't lift with me yesterday, but when they come in tomorrow, we'll be doing something that is pretty percentage based.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense, and that's something that I do. I mean I like the kind of the conjugate style, especially with our teams that are in season, like kind of having that. I think it's just 2 days a week. It makes sense. Like we do like a little bit more of like a max every day early in the week, and then a little bit more of a dynamic effort later in the week. And we had wrestling in this morning, and they were doing sumo deadlifts, and that's basically what I had on there. We used a Train Heroic app, so on their instead of a workout card, it's on their phone. It said, you're going to work up to a heavy single at 90%. But I tell all of them, look, you guys just wrestled this weekend. If that heavy sing, if your work, your kind of your ramp up sets, if they feel heavier than a 6 out of 10, a 7 out of 10, an 8 out of 10, then that 90% is not going to be the 90% that I want you to hit. I need you to round down 10 to 15 pounds. But if
Yeah.
you didn't wrestle this weekend and you feel great, you're not cutting weight or anything like that, then that 90% might actually need to be 92% today. You might need to throw 2.5s or 5 pound plates on there. So it's definitely something where like in season, you got 30 wrestlers and 20 of them are kind of wrestling pretty routinely. Those 20 guys, you almost kind of have to like manage them throughout the year. And like there's guys that are like, they're going to round down 30 or 40 pounds. They're going to have to round down even more just because they're beat up and they got something going on or whatever it is. So,
Where they're cutting a
um,
ton of weight.
cutting a ton of
I
weight.
mean,
Yeah. Hopefully,
that's
hopefully at this point, our guys aren't cutting a ton of weight, but yeah, that's definitely something that we still have issues with that at times this late in the season. How much are you involved with that? Like, obviously, the sports nutrition is handling that, and the coaches are obviously probably doing some stuff with that as well. But is that something where if you know a guy is like really, really cutting and he's got a match a day or 2 days away from now, are you like, I don't want to say I get like a little bit annoyed, but that's probably the easiest way to say it is like, I still think you can come in and do something in the weight room. I don't think you should just skip lift and just go run and go on the treadmill or go on the assault bike only. But I understand it to an extent of just cardio is what they want to use to cut weight. I still think there's a way to get in the weight room and spend 20, 30 minutes doing whatever, snatch, clean jerk, squat, bench, deadlift. Do some of the kind of the main movements, and then you can go do your conditioning. I mean, how does that kind of work with you? Or is it where like guys are cutting weight, they just are solely focused on cardio and burning calories, or is there an aspect of they're still doing some higher intensity stuff with you, or what?
um well
Just
I
dependent.
we trying to think, like, we probably only have like one, maybe two guys that is like really cutting weight, like where it's a concern. We've had years where it's been way more. um I mean, I don't really, I don't ever do a, hey, this is a weight cut workout. Like, I'm not touching that. um there will be days where I'll be like, hey, today's a circuit lift. If you want to wear sweats, maybe sweat a little bit more, sweatshirt, sweatpants, I'm cool with it. Normally I make them train in shorts and a t-shirt for lifts. but I don't really, I don't really want to get involved in their weight cut. We have a really good nutrition staff here. How many of our guys truly utilize that? Couldn't tell you. Um, you know, I mean, we have a number that go to them. How many of them actually implement what they're told? I couldn't tell you that. Um, so I I don't really have guys that are like, hey, I can't lift today because I have to cut weight. Like that has never been a thing. Um, I will have program. I've had programs from year to year where it's like, hey, this guy is going to struggle with weight. I don't want to do any hypertrophy movement with them at all during the season. So we may have a strength day, or like preseason, we may have a strength day, we may have a power day, and then we have a circuit day. So like, I'm just kind of removing any hypertrophy work out of what they're doing. Because I mean, the reality is wrestling is a sport where you have to account for every pound of muscle that you have. So I want it to be usable muscle. Like even with all of my wrestlers, I don't do a ton of hypertrophy work. Some of our stuff will be in hypertrophy ranges, but like I don't do a hypertrophy block ever. Like we're always strength power.
Yeah, that's
Um, I'm no one's trying to get bigger. Maybe some of our heavyweights, but like even the age of the big heavyweight isn't even a thing anymore. You look at the best heavyweights, they're athletes. They are built like smaller wrestlers, they're just bigger. They move well, they have good footwork, they can change levels. Those the big guy, uh, you know, Chris Taylor, although, he wouldn't have made weight today, but you don't have guys like that anymore.
Yeah. No, I mean, and honestly, the thing that you said there, that's kind of just one of my overarching philosophies is just like I just want to make you a better athlete. Like if I can make you a better athlete, like you're probably going to be better at basketball, wrestling, soccer, football, whatever, baseball, whatever. Like I can't make you hit a baseball better. Like, but if I can at least give you maybe some physical tools, maybe a little bit, then it's going to help you at least maybe stretch out a ground ball that normally you wouldn't have been able to, or track down a fly ball that you may not have been able to. But um,
Yeah, you're
I,
going to get me on another soapbox about sports specificity there if you're not careful.
Yeah, well, I mean, hey, we can go down that route. I got time if you got time. I mean, I'm like that word makes me that little phrase makes me cringe to be honest
Oh
with you.
my God.
Like wrestling practice is sport specific. Like there's
Yeah,
nothing you
for
can do in the
sure.
weight room that's sport specific. So I mean, we can go down that road. I'm sure we'll be in complete agreement.
I'll say this because I'm sure you actually have heard this before, but one of the things that Daryl said years and years ago, not sports specific, task specific. And when he said that, I was like, yes, like, you know, we need to be energy system specific and muscular contraction has to be specific. But like these people that are trying to replicate the sport in a weight room or whatever, it's like, no, that doesn't work. That doesn't work, and just like that'd be like kind of like me saying, well, once you can squat 500, you're going to be an all-American. No, there's no chart that tells you those things. Just progress, just continually get stronger, get more powerful, be able to change directions, lower your level, things like that, and you'll be a better wrestler.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we can move on from that.
No, you're good. Honestly, and the thing is, like, that's what sucks sometimes about the weight room warriors is like, as a strength coach, I wish the weight room warriors, I wish the guys that like took their squat from 400 to 500, I wish they also got like whatever that would be 25% better as a wrestler too. Like, I wish
Right.
that that was the case. It's just not always the case. I wish that like every baseball player that we had that gained, that doubled their squat strength and doubled their deadlifting strength. I wish their exit velocity and their pitching velocity doubled. Like I wish that was the case, but it's just not. So it's one of
Yeah.
those where we have to realize that there is a point where, like you said, and Daryl, you mentioned Daryl, like the task specific aspect. Like just because you can deadlift 500 pounds doesn't mean that you're going to be able to like take some like use that same force is going to transfer to you taking somebody down or hitting a baseball or making a block on the football field or whatever it may be. So,
Yeah.
um, I don't know if I, like I said, I knew your dad played in the NFL. I knew he was like into the strength world, but I don't know if I kind of knew as much. And like I said, I watched that one video of with Zach Evanesh, and you guys were talking a little bit about that. He was a competitive strongman. Just kind of give us a little bit about background on him and his kind of professional career and then his training career, and then just kind of how he's been like how that's been or what he's done to be the biggest influence on you as a person and as a coach.
Yeah. Uh, I I mean that's there's a lot there to unpack, I guess. So I mean, I guess I'll start with like, I mean, when I was born, the day I was born, my dad was playing in Cleveland. So I was 2 months early. Um, and so he found out I was born because the Browns announced it on the Jumbotron. Congratulations, John Kolb, your son Tanner just born, blah, blah, blah. That's how he found out I was born. He proceeded to jump off sides 3 times. Um, and really funny story that he would have to tell, leading up to that. So, like, you know, from the day I was born, my family's been rooted in sports. You know, and my dad, listening to him talk about the first weight set he got when he was in seventh grade, that, you had to order out of a catalog. It might have been a Sears catalog. I don't know. In Owasso, Oklahoma, outside Tulsa. And no one knew what to do. And so, he was looking in magazines for how to train. And then, getting to Oklahoma State, and, they still didn't lift, you know, as a team then, and lifting with guys there. And even when he got to the Steelers, it wasn't a thing. When he first got to the Steelers, they worked out in Washington, PA. There's a restaurant. Um, it was called the Red Bull Inn. The man that owned it, I believe his name was Lou Coringa. And you walk into the basement. I was obviously there, but I don't remember it in person. I remember seeing pictures of it. But it was like that awesome weight room where the benches and the pads had more duct tape than fabric. None of the weights matched. They were all rusted. The bars were all bent to shit. And everything was probably about 5 pounds heavier than the number on it. And, it was just one of those weight rooms where, like, you were going to get strong and tetanus. Like, that was it. And so, like, the Steelers didn't even have a weight room, right? And, there's pictures from Latrobe, of their strength program. Was just like a barbell with some 25s, and guys were doing curls and overhead presses at training camp on the sidelines. So it wasn't even a thing back then. And, those guys, they trained a lot, lifted a lot. And, you know, they have the NFL strongman, or they did have the NFL strongman competition. And I couldn't tell you how many years, but it was like my dad, Mike Webster, and Steve Corson were like first, second, and third for however many years. And like you said, my dad was in the World Strongest Man competition. Um, I think he got third twice and like fifth or seventh or something. Like, I don't know. But like, there you can pull up and watch him pull Bill Kazmaier and tug of war and onto his face. Back then there weren't really like strong men like today that's what they do year round. The strong men back then, like Lou Ferrigno, uh, the Hulk, was a competitor. So it was like football players, a lot of power lifters, Don Reinhold, those guys, like thrower, shot putters. Was it Bob Youngs, I believe? I'm horrible with names, so I feel bad if I'm butchering some of these guys. So it was a little bit different, but cool, And so dad did pretty well, won a number of events. Had one year where he potentially could have done better. They were carrying a refrigerator up a hill, and the strap broke, and so the fridge was dragging. And tell you a little bit about my dad. Like he finished instead of like, oh, this broke. I'm gonna reset. He finished the race, and they were like, okay, you posted the time. And he's like, well, I wanted to do it again because it broke, and they wouldn't let him do it again because it broke. And that was one of the years he got third place, and so coulda, shoulda, woulda.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, that was just his mentality, and my dad has never told me be careful. And so that is something that I realized a number of years ago, and it's like, yeah, that's a real good way to live. Don't be careful, manage risk, right? Like, and I tell my son, like, we went mountain biking the other day. I took him and one of his buddies, and I was like, okay, go ahead, have fun, don't be careful. And Lincoln's heard me say that however many times, but his friend like turned around and looked at me cross-eyed, and I was like, listen, you guys are 15 years old. Do stupid shit now when the consequences are low. Like, okay, you break your arm, you break your leg, that sucks, but like, it's better than when you're 22 riding down the street on a motorcycle when you wreck. Consequences are low now. Do stupid shit. So like that's the kind of stuff that my dad taught me. Like, you don't quit on stuff. I remember going on runs. He's pretty famous for some of the runs that he would do and lead guys on when he was playing in Pittsburgh. I mean, you've been to Pittsburgh. Some of those hills are hills, and they would go and run those hills. And one I remember running with my dad being young, and you never stop running on the hill. If you need to take a break, you take a break at the top hill. You don't take a break on the hill. And so, just stuff like that, really influential. And you mentioned the 20s program earlier. I mean, that's his program. He created it. And I don't know what year he created it, but it's at least 40, 50 years later, and I'm still, actually, I know it's more than 50 years old, but I'm still using it today. And at least once a year, I'm putting my wrestlers through the 20s for a block or two, if not
Yeah.
longer. I mean, we ran 20s this off season, and like I said, we ran our strength program, the strength part of our program, longer than we ever had. And we started at 20s, made it all the way through, got into come downs. And I've never really gotten to come downs with wrestling, which is the last part of that program. So yeah, it was still using it.
So, and honestly, first of all, that's awesome with your dad's history. That's freaking cool. Like, and that's something, again, I go back to Summer Strong because that's the first time I'd been down at their headquarters and met Bert Soren. Obviously, his dad passed away a year or two ago now, but
Yeah.
Summer Strong was amazing. Summer Strong was literally the coolest thing, like strength thing I've ever been to, conference wise or anything. And you walk into their headquarters and it's just like a history of especially strongman type stuff, grip strength and that kind of stuff. But I mean, there's pictures of like bodybuilders and powerlifters and strongmen and everybody in between on the walls, athletes that have trained down there. So it's like one of those things where I love strength history. Like it's something I'm a big fan of. And even when I was a kid, like I love like watching the old Franco and Schwarzenegger and those guys training videos and stuff like that. So I have somewhere here, actually it might be packed away because we're moving, but I had my Arnold Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding, even though I don't look like I bodybuild by any means, but it's something it was an influence on me from I was like 13, 14 years old.
Yeah.
So it's just awesome to have that kind of history and stuff. So can you elaborate on the 20s program? Because I know me and Zane were, like I said, we were talking about it a couple months ago, and I think you had maybe explained it to me back in the day, but I honestly cannot remember exactly all the details of it. And I think part of understanding the details of it is you probably really need to actually just go through it and do it.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of know for sure.
Yeah. I listen, I will send it to you. Obviously, I mean, I put Zane through it so many times. He should, and
Yeah,
he spent so much time
he
watching
explained
wrestling
it to
do
me,
it.
but like again, it's one of those where it's like it's hard for me to like understand it when someone
Yeah.
else explain it without me like seeing it or doing it at the same time.
Yeah. So the quick and dirty, you're gonna spend 4 weeks at 20s, 18s, 16s, 2 rounds of 12, 14s, 2 rounds of 12s, and then your goal is to get the come downs. So I'll kind of explain it the end first. And come downs is you're going to go up to your max. So this is a typically a bench program. I've done it on other stuff. Um, if you have highly trained people, it would work on squat. But squat's like one of those things where like you can probably always squeeze out maybe one more rep. Where bench, when you're done, you're done. You know what I mean? And because you're going to failure, I don't want people to go to failure on squat, especially if they're using a lot of weight. I mean, I've got a number of 500-pound squatters. I'm not sitting here trying to catch 500 pounds all day long. Um, so like I probably wouldn't do this on squat. I personally have, but I wouldn't do it with an athlete. So you're going to your max. Um, and so we do it. So essentially we do a max day and then we run come downs kind of generically that day. The next time you come in, we're putting 5 pounds on your max. So let's say you hit 300 on bench last week, you're starting with 305. You hit 305, make it or miss it, it gets racked. Okay. You've got 30 seconds. We're taking a percentage of weight off the bar, 5 to 10%. I can go over that in a little bit too. After 30 seconds, I'm giving you a 3, 2, 1. I'm handing you the bar. You go again. As many reps as you can get. Nowhere in this program, if you get a rep, you start the next rep unless it's your first rep on come downs. If you get one, you start one. So you need spotters. And so you hit it, you probably get a, we're talking, you're going from doing 100% to doing 90% with a 30-second break. You're probably only getting one rep again. Then we're going to drop weight, and we keep dropping weight with 30-second breaks until you get a total of 5 in one set. And so that's come downs. And so what happens is we'll get guys that get stuck at 4, like 4 reps, they go for 5 and they're stuck. And, I'm trying to think of the biggest drop we had. I think the biggest drop we had this off season, we've had a number of guys that have to go all the way down to the bar and can't get the bar for a set of 5. And it's like, okay, do 5 push-ups. But I think the heaviest person that we had drop all the way down to the bar would be maybe around 275. Did max 1 rep 275 and then couldn't do the bar for 5 reps. Okay. So if you made the weight, the next week we add 5 pounds. You make the weight that week, we add 5 pounds, we add 5 pounds, and we keep adding 5 pounds until you miss 3 times in a row. Okay. So like, let's say, you got 300 the first week, you got 305, 310, you come in 315. Well, that's kind of a milestone. So you're going to have a mental block. You're going to miss 315 the first time. Okay. You still do your come downs all the way through. Come in the next week, 315, miss it again. Still do your come downs all the way through. Third week, come in, you get it, cool. We'll go up again next week. And we keep running come downs until you miss 3 weeks in a row at one weight. So like if you would have missed 305 the first week, then got it, then missed 310, missed it, got it. Doesn't matter how many weeks misses you have total, it's 3 in a row, and then you're off the program. So everything's kind of self-periodized because it's based on whatever you did last week. So that's come downs, that's the end. 20s and all the other ones, whatever the reps are for the week, 20 down to 12, divide it in half, subtract 2. So, and that's your starting weight. So 20s, your starting weight is a weight you can get 8 to 10 times. 12s, your starting weight is a weight you can get 4 to 6 times. And basically we're going to start, if it's 20s, maybe you're starting with 215 and you get 8 reps. Cool. You're right in our rep range. You go to failure, your spotter has to rack the bar. I don't know, if we're doing 20s, you're not allowed to rack the bar. So if you make the rep, you have to start the next one. It's up to your spotters to put the bar away. Um, so, you get your 8 reps, rack it as fast as your spotter. So we do groups of 4. So we always have one guy behind and 2 guys to change weights and help spot. And I tell them I want you guys like a NASCAR pit crew. As soon as that bar touches the hooks, we're changing the weight. And we try not to use, like, if you're starting at 315, you're not going to have 345s on there, because I don't want to have to take a 45 off and then put a 25 and 2 10s on, or a 10 and a 5 or whatever. We're starting with small weights, so I can just pull a 10 off, throw a 5 on, you're good to go. I want, I want that, we'll call it the amortization phase, to be as quick as possible, right? As soon as that thing touches, I want it ready to go again. And then spotter hands you the bar, you go, you keep going. And that is an accumulated rep, unlike come downs. And you go until you get a total of 20 reps. All right. Now, the rule is you can't finish on a single. So if you hit 19 and then you miss 20, bar gets racked, you got 2. Plus, we're always going to failure. So if you get your 2 and you can do another one, you're not allowed to rack your own bar. You got to go until the spotter, until you fail and the spotter racks it. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of that. And, we'll do that once a week. Sometimes, depending on the program, we might do it on bench and on like incline bench. We might do it with incline dumbbell or something like that. But that's our volume day. You know, I the beginning of it, yeah, is the most hypertrophy really that we're going to get, and it is quite a bit. But we move quickly into the strength block, using some higher weights, and so we'll spend about 4 weeks on 20s, 4 weeks on 18s, 4 weeks on 16s, and their weights are just flying up. I mean, and even if they weren't getting stronger, the weights are going to go up because we're reducing the rep range to start. So, you got guys handling significant weight pretty quickly, and then we get down to the come downs. And this year, we had one guy out of 30, whatever, however many guys we had in the off season, 38. We had one guy that missed a new max 3 weeks in a row. Everyone else, every week or every other week, was adding 5 pounds to their bench. And then when you look back at what we started on it, we got guys that put 45 plus pounds on their bench press in an off season, and yeah, I mean, it does sound a little unbelievable, but it's a no joke program.
Yeah. No, I mean, it sounds awesome because of just, especially when you get to the come down phase, because you're basically just you're providing the stimulus to try to like basically bust through like a plateau almost, is kind of what it seems like. So no, that's cool. Just a couple quick questions here at the end, just more so because I know obviously I have interns and GAs, and I know you kind of run the internship stuff up there. So what are like, especially like with, and I hate to be the old guy and be like, especially with kids nowadays and interns nowadays, but there definitely is something different. Like I'm not gonna lie to you. Like I feel like things are different just from when I was an intern 12 years ago to now. Um, what are some of the biggest things maybe that you see now that they either struggle with, like whether it's an educational aspect or experience, or whether it's like a work ethic? Like, is there any like trends that you feel like interns just need to be better at, like as they come into the program, or think that they all have to kind of get better as they've gone through the program? Like, what is like maybe that big or one or two big things that it just seems like there's like a trend that they struggle with.
I watch podcast clips and stuff, reels, whatever, of a lot of like not necessarily business, but like management stuff, like how to manage people. Um, and a lot of it is corporate based, so not super relevant to what we do, but there, I find some gems in there. And I was watching one a week or so ago, and the guy was talking about like, and two older guys chatting, and I mean older like 40s, 50s, not like old. Um, but they were talking about like, you know, for people in our generation, like we keep wanting to hire people like us, and they're not out there anymore. There are, but in general, they're not out there anymore. And you know, I have this conversation with Caitlin all the time with the interns. I'm like, you know, we talk about standards in the weight room. Like this is somewhere where we've drastically had to adjust our standard because, you know, we wouldn't get any interns. We wouldn't have anyone start because they have to build those qualities, those intangible qualities have to be built in here now. They're not coming in with them. And listen, we have, you know, one of our assistants started out as an intern with us. Our current GA started out as an intern with us. You know, I'm not going to say that they didn't have those qualities when they started, but you know, they have definitely developed some really good qualities over time. And had I interviewed them and been looking for someone like we would have looked for 15 years ago, neither one of them would have gotten hired. And we would have missed out on two great kids. Um, you know, uh, so I think that, so I have definitely changed my standard for interns uh, coming in. And let me that will be the caveat to everything because um, you know, I used to not take interns that didn't want to be college strength coaches. I want to be a high school strength coach. It's different. This isn't that world. That's not this world. Find someone, go intern at a high school. You know, and that was my perspective. And it occurred to me like, well, how do these kids know that they don't want to be college strength coaches? Like, you know, maybe they've just never had the opportunity to see what it was all about because I didn't have the opportunity to see what a college strength coach was until after I'd already graduated college. Um, so I was like, shit, man, I'm being the gatekeeper and I don't ever want to be a gatekeeper. Like I don't want to be, you know, I want people to fail because they suck, not because I didn't give them the opportunity, you know. Well, I don't want anyone to fail. That sounded maybe I do. I don't know.
I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
Right. Yeah, like I don't want to be the reason why someone doesn't get the opportunity. So then, you know, and so now I'm kind of like the pendulum swung the other way and like now we're ending up with like 14 interns a semester and it's like, oh, I got too many kids. I'm sick of reading crappy programs. You know, it's like we got 14 kids and I've got 7 really good programs and 7 just like, did you Google program and this is what it gave you? So yeah. Um, I don't want to, you know, I don't want like, oh no, there's no good people out there. That's not it. There's really good interns out there. It's just you gotta change your perspective of what they're gonna be when they start. Because I think we can still get them to be unbelievable at the end. Like, you know, I've got an intern right now who will probably be our next GA. Sorry, in two. We're bringing an intern back to be our next GA for 1 year because we have another intern that will be our next GA in 2 years. And so I think kind of that is the importance of interns is like, you know, being able to like, hey, we have an opening. Well, look at all these people that we've had come through. Um, and I used to keep track of like, okay, this intern left and they went to, you know, we had just in the area, we had a former intern that was coaching at Kent State and Akron and Slippery Rock. And I don't know if they're still there. Like I used to keep track of them all. Um, you know, Frostburg. And like I always thought that was good because then, hey, we have a job opening. Oh, where was what was that intern that we had that was really good? He was up at, you know, I'll use Connor who was at Slippery Rock because he was really good. Like, oh, maybe we'll call Connor and see what he's doing these days and if he'd be interested in come down. Because like you know, when you're hiring, like nobody gets a job in this field. I shouldn't say nobody. It is rare to get a job in this field if you don't have a connection where you're getting hired, unless you're being hired by a sport coach or an administrator. If you're being hired as an assistant coach, like we have never hired someone that we didn't either A, know, or B, have someone that we know really, really well recommend them very highly. Like, our last job opening, we had 112 applications. Dude, I can't read 112 applications like with any kind of uh
Thoroughness, like basically like sitting.
thoroughness. Like
Yeah.
it just there's no way. There's
Yeah.
no way. Like if I
Yeah.
spent 5 minutes, like there's half my week gone. Right. So you gotta be like, okay, how are we separating these? And we have a number of ways that we'll do that. And usually Coach Sweeney and I just divide them in half. Well, it's on a dashboard. So like we can go in and it's like, you just kind of take the next one up and you're both doing it. So you end up kind of getting half of them. Um, but like, yeah, I mean, if we don't know you and I look at your references and I don't know any of them and I look at where you've been and I don't know anybody that was there at the same time as like where you're
Yeah.
probably not making even the first cut
Yeah.
unless
And
there's something really special, like things that are special to me, like I said, if someone comes, like they spent some time at a Division 3 or Division 2 level where they've had to grind by themselves, that dude or lady is probably a worker. They probably know how to work a little bit. So, I may move them to round 2. Someone has some military background. They're probably know how to work a little bit. So, like for me, work ethic is huge. So if there are little things in their resume that jump out that like, hey, this person might be a worker, like they're a wrestler. They probably know how to work a little bit. Um, I might move them through.
yeah, no, no, I'm honestly, I agree with all that. Like, I look for that too. Like, and obviously with my position, it's weird because I'm basically hiring young coaches that have very little, if any, experience. So I mean, Josh is on here, and I'm not just trying to blow smoke at him, but like, the fact that he was willing to intern for 2 years at WVU football, like I know he's gonna want to work hard. Like he's probably actually thinks being at Fairmont sometimes is like being on vacation because we don't work 60 hours a week like Mike Joseph does. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
one of those things where, well, my GAs don't work 60-hour weeks. Sometimes I might, but my GAs don't.
yeah,
So it's one of those where, and then my previous GA, he was on the baseball team and he was just a grinder on the baseball team. So it's just one of those things where like I'm able to kind of see that. I'll tell you this, like I love the network stuff, and I think I might have sent you a text at some point in the last couple of years or in emails and stuff, seeing if you guys had anybody. And
yeah,
I actually had three people. So I just hired a GA yesterday or the day before. Had a position open up, and I had three people in my network. No one kind of in the WVU network, but people outside of that network that I know. And they recommended three different people to me, and all three of those people ended up backing out. And honestly, I don't know if they all wanted to be strength coaches. I think is part of the bottom line of it, but it was like I don't want to move financial. Like I don't want to be a poor college kid again, or hey, I can't move my bed and my couch into the house by Monday. And it's like, bro, like just come sleep on the floor for a week until you get your like. I think there's just a little bit of that loss with like just, and then again, I sound like the old person saying it, but there's a little bit of the lost thing of like when I interned at WV football. I was already in my GA. I was doing the Human Performance Lab at XFIT. So I was doing my GA for 20 hours a week, and I'd still go over and intern almost 20 to 30 hours a week. So,
yeah,
I mean, I was putting in 40 hours a week, and half of that wasn't being paid or anything like that. You got kids now that are applying for paid internship or pay GA positions and stuff like that, saying like I don't want to have to take an unpaid position. It's like, do you not understand? And again, I don't think I agree with unpaid positions, but I do think it helps us weed people out. It makes us really
yeah,
makes us really like I do. I go back and forth on like I don't want anybody to have to struggle like I did as a young coach financially, but I don't think I'd be where I'm at and still be doing this and loving how much I do it if I didn't have to struggle. So I think there's like a dichotomy there of like I don't want you to have to do the things that I did, but also like I need you to do those things so that I know that you're legit. So
yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if you have any other follow up thoughts on that before we hop off here or not, but
Oh, 11 billion. Um, yeah, I mean I'm with you. Like I don't like the unpaid internship. Um, I don't think it'll ever go away in our field. But it is there, and I think it's a society, generational, whatever. Like entitlement is huge. Like I see it with our athletes. Like they just feel like they should get everything. But I mean, we have that stuff like hiring, we hiring our entry level coaching positions. It's like, well, I'm not going to work for that little. Like it's entry level. It's expected that you have little to no full-time coaching experience I mean, you know, unfortunately we don't pay more. I wish we did. I wish I made more. You know, I'm sure everybody can say the same thing, but cost of living around here is horrible. Like you can make just about anything work. I don't know, man. It's like there are six-figure strength coach salaries out there, but I mean, it's with football and basketball, maybe a baseball gig here and there. Like people coming in, hey, my first strength coach job as an assistant, I want to be at 75, 80. I don't know where you're finding that, entry level position.
Glad you guys kept the podcast rolling. I have no idea what happened. My computer just like it kicked me out and it said there's no connection. I could hear Tanner talking, and I heard Josh. I heard you say I think just Adams froze, and then it literally like just closed out of my browser. So I'm on my phone right now, but appreciate you guys keeping it rolling and didn't just kind of be like, what the heck? But hopefully it's still recording it. I hope.
The
Tanner,
record button's on.
okay, okay. So hopefully it is.
I don't think anyone's gonna make it 2 hours listening to us bullshit back and forth, though.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. So I appreciate you getting on here. Josh, you got any questions for Tanner before we let him go?
I just had one. I was wondering, obviously, with your three various teams, if you do any standardized testing weekly for fatigue management or any of your just KPIs throughout the year for your teams.
Yeah. So, good question. And I think having KPIs is huge, uh, because we are living in a time where if you can't defend what you're doing or how you're doing it, like it's too easy to get thrown under the bus. We're losing games because we're not strong enough. We can't jump. We're out of shape. Whatever thing you want to say. So, you need to develop those KPIs with your coach and then figure out how you're tracking them and how often you're tracking them. As far as fatigue management, which was the first part of your question, throughout preseason, I will do our first lift of the week. I will do grip strength hand dynamometer grip strength with wrestling. Um, Nothing. I don't do any fatigue management with rifle because there's really no variation in their accumulated stress. They literally practice the same way, the same volume regularly, and our lifts twice a week aren't really enough to kind of fluctuate that any way, shape, or form. Plus, rifle is one of those sports where there are no KPIs for me. Like anything you could come up with really isn't a KPI, because it's a sport where they stand still. Other than maybe like a lowered resting heart rate, and so like maybe I could do resting heart rates, but again, like, can I really say, well, their resting heart rate is being lowered today because whatever, maybe they slept more, who knows. So no, nothing with them. And then really just because the amount of training time that I have with soccer, I haven't really implemented anything because every semester is like we're just starting over. So like I will track things through the off season for them, like we have Nord boards, so I'll do some Nord board testing. We'll do some different jump testing and things like that. But I don't do it weekly for a fatigue management perspective, but I will do those things for a KPI management perspective to make sure, like, I mean, I think it's good. Is my program doing what I think it's doing? If all your validation is coming from a coach saying, yeah, it looks like we jump better, it looks like we're running faster, I mean, you were talking about conditioning with wrestling earlier. If you're a really good wrestler, you always look like you're in shape, regardless of if you're not, because you're in control. And then all of a sudden you got to wrestle someone that's close to your level, and wow, he looked really out of shape today. No, he's always been out of shape. He's just finally wrestling someone that's on his level. Or, we've had years where we're really bad wrestlers. Wow, we look out of shape in every match. No, we're in shape. We're just really shitty, you know. So, I think having those KPIs is huge, and constantly working with your sport coaches to determine what those KPIs are, how you're assessing them, and what they want to see. And having a very, very objective metric for what you're doing other than, yeah, they passed the eye test, or yeah, they look like fill in the blank.
Yeah, I think that's a good question and good answer. Like, it's good to hear that. And yeah, even at our level, we try to do stuff, but it's hard. It's even just consistency. Like sometimes we're gonna get like we're trying to have our men's basketball team. Like I try to track vertical jump throughout the season. We set up jump mats and we just try to track it and kind of at least look at trends. But sometimes our men's basketball team's gonna come in after practice and jump. Sometimes they're gonna come in before practice.
Right.
Sometimes it's gonna be in the morning. Sometimes it's gonna be in the afternoon. So it's like even if we're trying to standardize the testing battery and use it as a trend, it's also not always perfect just because sport is not always perfect. Like S&C in the college setting is just not perfect. You can't control every variable. So,
For sure.
Tanner, that was awesome. I appreciate your time. Sorry I had those technical issues. I have no idea what the heck happened.
No problem.
But hopefully it still recorded all of it. I think it's saying it still is, so that's good. But I appreciate your time, and it was great catching up with you. And I definitely think there's going to be a lot for everybody to get out of this. So I can't wait to kind of get it on YouTube and share it. So
Yeah.
appreciate it.
All right, buddy.
Yeah.
Josh, good seeing you. Adam, have a
You
great
too.
evening.
Yes, sir. You have a good one. Good luck to you guys the rest of the season.
Yeah. Yeah.